Ontario, and eventually to a contract with Columbia Records in New York City, and the release in 1968 of Spin the Bottle. The song became a local hit, though it was more bubblegum than the hard driving R&B sound the band was noted for. The Bluesmen Revue split up in 1969, having had a profound influence on the development of the London music scene and the 1960s, and its members went on to long careers in the music business. Jim still performs regularly and has just completed a book about the London music scene in the 60s called Battle of the Bands, and rumor has it that it even includes me in it. I'm not sure. Anyway, I worked at Bluesmen Records in the old days. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jim Chapman.
Thank you, Fred.
Oh, yeah. You're for the tall guys, right? Fred is, in fact, in the book. There's pictures in there a couple times, some stories. I'd just like to say, I don't quite know what to say. I'm very honored by this, that the Bluesmen have been recognized for what we did in the 1960s, because it was a very special time and it was a very special band, and we were very lucky to have accomplished a great deal. As Fred noted, we headlined shows across Southern Ontario. At the peak of the band's popularity, we were signed with Columbia Records in New York City, and that was a wonderful, exciting time. And as I was driving down here, it occurred to me that there was something else about this band that maybe set us apart a little bit from some of the other 1960s London bands. And that is that everybody in that group went on to a career in music. Now, there were, according to the research from my book, 85 established London bands in the 1960s, bands that played regularly and had a following, with more than 300 musicians in them. And of those 300 musicians, there's just a tiny handful that actually made careers out of music. And I think it's interesting that the Bluesmen Revue, the 7 guys that were in that band at various times, every one of them went on to have a career in music. Rick Wads, who came to us from the Fortune Tellers, another very important early 60s London rock and roll band. Rick moved to the United States after playing with a few bands after the Bluesmen. Everybody in the band played with a few bands after the Bluesmen and then went on to other things. But Rick moved to the United States, played with a version of the Grassroots for a while. You'd be familiar with them. They had a lot of hit records. Moved to Florida after that, became a very well-known one-man show. Opened his own recording studio, was successful with that, and later became an internationally recognized steel guitar player, what they call stand-up steel, without the pedals, under the name Rick Alexander, and he became well-known as a performer and particularly as a teacher and an educator about steel guitar. Rick sadly passed in 2009, so R.I.P. rather to him. Kenny Allison, who was mentioned, my dear friend, that I met Ken when we were 10 years old, and we started our music careers together and came up through the Bluesmen together. And Ken had a great career after that. He played with a band called Juggernaut that was one of the most popular bands in the area for years. Went on to work with Ron Brown's band, had his own band, the Ken Allison Blues Band, had his own recording studio, was a recording engineer, and until his retirement from music a few years ago, remained active in it. Paul Kersey, who was our drummer, went on to play played with a few bands after the band, went on to play with Max Webster and The Hunt and The Wheelers, 3 very well-known Canadian bands. I'm not sure if Paul is still playing or not. I've communicated with him a little bit, but I can't answer that question. He's been a little quiet about it, so I don't know. But certainly he played for many, many, many years after the Bluesmen. Dave Partridge, our guitar player, who was a particularly influential player in London, and there are interviews in my book. I don't want to keep coming back to that, but it relates to what we're talking about. There are a number of interviews in there with young guitar players in various bands who talked about Dave and how influential he was. He had a very interesting guitar style that nobody else in town really had at that point. And Bill Durst acknowledges Dave as one of his influencers, and Jim Pauly, who played with Grant Smith and the Power, same thing. Lots of guys. So David, after the Bluesmen, played in Juggernaut for a while with Ken, played with some other bands, and then moved out west. He sadly had to quit playing because he had some health problems, but he's working through them, we hope, and we wish him well too. Dave Baker, who was our keyboard player, again played with several bands after the Bluesmen, and then went back to school and got a degree in music, musicology, and performance and composition. And he continues to pursue that today on his own, but he practices almost every day. I talked to him just the other day. Still practices piano almost every day and is still studying composition. And as he said, there's always something new to learn. So he's made a career out of the music business. Charlie Mitchell, who was the second of our two drummers, we had double drummers for a while. Charlie went on to play with Chris Kearney and Pemmican, which was a well-known Canadian band. Played with Jerry Doucette too from Nova Scotia. Charlie had a long career as a drummer. He is not playing now. He's on the West Coast and fighting some serious health problems, so I want to wish him the best. Who have I missed? Rick? Dan? Oh, me! Is that right? Have I missed anybody? I don't think so. Yeah. I had a pretty fun career too. I, like everybody else, played in a few bands after the Bluesmen. Ended up working with Ronnie Hawkins, playing in his band for a while. Had a recording studio, as did, I mentioned, Ken and Rick Watts ran a recording studio too. There was three of us from those bands who ended up having our own recording studios. And I had a band management company and did a bunch of other stuff. The one thing that I'm particularly proud of was that for 3 years I was the only staff paid songwriter at a radio station in Canada. I worked at CFPL, and they paid me, unbelievable, to write comedy songs for Peter Garner's morning show for 3 years. So that was, to me, that was very exciting. And I had a song called "Stand Up for Canada" that was used by the the non-separatist bunch in 1995 in the big referendum, and it was recorded by a group called the True Grit Band that included Jean Chrétien, the Prime Minister at the time, and Joe Fontana and a bunch of other MPs, and they recorded a version of that song, and it was heard across the country on CBC several times, and so that was kind of fun too. So I've had a great time. I'm still playing today, and glad to be able to do that. But I think that maybe makes that band a little special. There's certainly other people in London who had long musical careers after the 60s, but I think it's kind of unique that all 7 of the members of the band went on to long-time musical careers, and I'm proud of that, and I'm proud of all the guys, and I know if they were all here tonight, none of the rest of them could be here. I hope some of them may be able to make it to the event on the is it the 17th, the 18th? 18th. I'm hoping that a couple of them will be able to make it there, but I'm going to speak on their behalf and for all their families tonight and say that we are all deeply, deeply honored at this recognition of the band and the things that we did, and hopefully the things we did after the band too. And so thank you to Mario, to the Hall of Fame, to everybody who had anything to do with the Bluesmen Review being included in this tonight. We are very, very, very grateful and very thankful.